Great to see you all. As Ian said, my name's David Oakley, and delighted you could join us at our Westroad site here at Bridge Community Church. Big hello to those who are watching online or watching on demand later. Delighted that we could all be together. As we're asking this question, what comes to mind at harvest time? And that sense of togetherness came out. We try and have a pray before a service, and Kate, who's been on keyboards today, she was praying particularly about that sense, that feel of community around harvest time. This feel of that sense of people all coming together because there's an urgency. And I must admit, for years, I didn't get it. I grew up on the outskirts of Liverpool. So yeah, there was farms everywhere, as you can imagine. Yeah, you know, the idea of farming was basically going down to the local quick save to get some tinned food, or the quickie, as we used to call it. It was never the quick save, it was going down the quickie. So we go down the quickie to get our food, and that was what we thought was harvest. And of course, it's beautiful coming into a community like Bury St Edmunds, where there's that sense of connection with more rural community, the sense of people who work the land, the sense of God's goodness. You see it as you go out, don't you? So what comes to mind at harvest time? Is it that spirit of community and connection and helping one another? Is it that sense of gratitude as you see the fields being harvested and being worked? Or are you a little bit naughty because at night, or when you're trying to drive along a narrow country lane, there's tractors and harvesters everywhere, and you think, no, I've got an appointment, get out of the way. I haven't seen you all year, and suddenly you're blocking the road, you know. So sometimes it swings and roundabouts on this stuff. Words that probably should never be heard from a church pulpit, but I'll say it. I've learned stuff from Jeremy Clarkson. Yeah, like my lad Lewis, he's a real petrol head, and so he loves Top Gear, and Jeremy Clarkson, who presents that. And Jeremy Clarkson went and bought a farm, and we got this series called Clarkson's Farm. So a guy who's as clueless as me about farming suddenly takes over this farm, and the language is bad at times, I must admit, but the stuff you learn, the insights of what it takes to run a farm is, for a city boy like me, it's profound. It's really amazing. And so it's just such a joy that we pause and we have one Sunday a year and just thank you. Thank you, God, for your goodness. Thank you to those who work the land and in the fields. And just this idea of community. The key thing, one of these key things I've learned about harvest is timing is everything. You've got to get that right time of year. You've got to get the plants when they're just right in order to do the harvest. The levels of moisture within the fields. If we get the timing wrong, it's a disaster. There is no harvest. Our future suddenly becomes a little bit vulnerable because we got the timing wrong. But when we see it's time, then it is all hands on deck. Everybody gets stuck in because there is a window of opportunity, and we think, right, we've got to get it in. We've got to get that food in. We've got to reap. We've got to get the harvest in order to create a better future for everyone. And of course, we understand that physically, but also we probably need to understand it spiritually as well. In that the Lord of the harvest, the God who gives us the physical food, has also given us each other. He's given us community. He's given us people. And there is a sense in which we've got to have eyes to see, is there a timing when we think God is going to move and work and do a harvest and bring people in together? And so that's what we're going to explore over the next 15, 20 minutes or so this morning. So there's 4 main points around this idea of harvest, 4 things that we keep in mind. First of all, it requires activity. You know, if you're a farmer, you can't just sit in your living room on the telly and talk a good game. No, you need to get out in the field and get it in. It's vital there is some activity. Secondly, in terms of spiritual insight, it's seeing the aimlessness and the struggle of people in this world of ours and just beginning to ask the question, is it time for God to move and work? Thirdly, feel the angst, feel the pain. Get a little bit angry when we start to see there is a problem here, that the demand for that sense of help and support exceeds what we can supply. We should start to feel it. And of course, if we're struggling to meet demand, sometimes that requires an ask. So 4 A's for us to look at this morning: being active, seeing the aimlessness, feel the angst, and do the ask. And that's where we're going to go this morning. So they're using this symbol, this metaphor, this picture of a physical harvest to impact people as a spiritual and social harvest. So we're going to turn to the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is the first book in the second part of the Bible called the New Testament, and it's one of 4 accounts about the life, the times, and the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. And each one of those 4 accounts has a different author and a different angle because it's written to a different audience. And Matthew, he's writing to a very Jewish audience. So you see lots of quotes from the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament as we call it. And he's writing to this group of people who, to be honest, at that point in time, are quite exclusive, quite inward looking. They're quite, if you like, protective of who they are. And then Matthew comes along, or Jesus comes along, and starts to have a go at these barriers that block for people to become the people of God as such. And Matthew's a prime example of the inclusive nature of Jesus in his ministry. Matthew was an outsider. People in the first century, Judah, hated Matthew because he conspired with the Roman occupiers. He cheated them, he went against them, and so people hated him. And he wouldn't have been allowed to come to things like this, to synagogue or church back then. And so this is someone like Matthew on the outside, and suddenly this radical new rabbi appears called Jesus of Nazareth and says, "Hey, Matthew, come and be part of my gang. Come and be one of my mates. Come and learn about the things of God." And so Matthew, when he writes his account, every single chapter, it seems to be full of people who were once excluded, outside the thing of God, being invited into the purposes and plans of God. And that ties in very nicely as we think about the plans of Jesus around harvest. So this is the setting we're going to look at, particularly that green part to the north of Galilee. This is where the events are going to take place of the verses that Ian read for us. So Jerusalem, Judah in the south, Samaria, that sort of mixed area, then to the northern part of Israel in Galilee. And Galilee was a place where people would regularly go to synagogue or church. They loved the scriptures. On the whole, they appeared to be godly sorted people. And Jesus spent 80% of his 3 years of ministry in that area of Galilee, a space not much bigger than Suffolk. And that's where the Son of God chose to focus most of his time, with this sense of, I want to recruit and I want people to be part of my plans and my ministry. So as we think about those 12 disciples, 11 of them were recruited from the north. Only one was recruited from the south. Guess who he was? Judas. Enough said, okay? Trust northerners, southerners, not so good. Yep, there's your little biblical principle for today. So yeah, this is where Jesus focused, and from that became the springboard to this global faith that we know as of Christianity. So Jesus, traveling around that Galilean region to the north, 250 villages and towns, constantly connecting within their church or synagogue settings in order to share all about himself. So let's jump in and let's start to think about this idea of being active. We read in Matthew 9, verse 35, Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, announcing the good news about the kingdom, and he healed every kind of disease and illness. So we see Jesus here, he's a man on a mission, isn't he? You've got this regional area, and he's trying to contact all these villages and towns, maybe up to 250 of them. So he's active, he's busy. He's not hiding away in one particular synagogue saying, "Oh, I'm all sorted, I'll stay here." No, he's engaging with people across the society in which he chose to work. And as a result of this man on a mission, Jesus starts to demonstrate a model or a paradigm or an example of how, when his life comes into a place, it can make a difference. I've tried to sort of highlight 3 things he did. First of all, he did some teaching. He instructed people in areas where they're struggling, in areas where they're ignorant, in areas where they're getting it wrong. Jesus stepped in and started to shape their thinking. Because when you shape thinking, it impacts behavior. Also, as part of this, he announced the good news about the kingdom. He preached this message saying, the king is here. And this would be typical in that culture. You go right back to Alexander the Great and then all the Roman emperors after that. They used to announce, I'm going to be king and this is what I'm going to do because I'm king. If you like, it's like a manifesto. You know, we've had the general election, haven't we? And people say, we get in power, if you vote for us, this is what we're going to do. And of course, sometimes people fall short on what they say. But with Jesus, he said, no, my kingdom reign, my kingdom rule is going to look like this. And as part of that, he brought healing, every kind of disease and illness. So if you were to read chapters 8 and chapter 9 of Matthew, you'll see all sorts of issues, problems, and struggles. And Jesus, because he's out there engaging and he's active, he addresses the disorder. He addresses the chaos. He starts to be a remedy for people who are struggling. This is part of his plan and his activity. I've tried to summarize it in these words, if you like. The reign and rule of Jesus means we give instruction. We provide some teaching. We provide insight onto the things of God, the reign and rule of Jesus. He's not, when we say he's king, he's not some kind of vicious dictator. No, he's a sacrificial king. He's a king who's giveaway. He's a king who uses his power for good. And then thirdly, he's someone who intervenes. Doesn't just hide away. He's actively intervening, sharing the word, doing good works, and also occasionally providing the miracles, the wonders, if you like. So it's almost like this model of Jesus. And there's an invitation that's going to come. It's saying, will you join me? Will you be part of this kind of activity? Will you make a difference? Will you be part of the solution that our culture and our society needs to hear? And as I say, it's quite radical because Jesus was doing this in a Bible Belt area. He was doing it in a place where people were going to synagogue every week, where people were reading their Jewish scriptures every week. So even in this quite a spiritual area, there was still chaos, disorder, pain, hurt, struggle. So imagine in a culture like ours where it's not cool, not trendy to go to church. And, who reads the Bible nowadays is often the mentality. How much more is the need for this kind of model to be implemented by people who want to be godly or Christ-like? This is our calling. Can we provide some teaching and instruction? Can we provide some insight to people? Can we intervene through what we say, through what we do, in order to make a difference? And the question is, why? Like David, let's face it, Jesus is unique. His time was unique. He said right at the beginning, harvest is a unique time. You've got to get the timing right. So this is where this next verse is quite key. As we ask the question, is this a harvest time, or was it just back then with Jesus? Let's read verse 36 to get insight on what Jesus considers to be the right time for a harvest. When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. Why? Because they were confused and helpless sheep without a shepherd. So for Jesus, harvest time is when there is chaos, when there is confusion, when people feel helpless and hopeless and haven't got solutions to their problems. That for Jesus is, look out for that. See the aimlessness. Then realize this is where the people of God need to step in because that is harvest time. This is the why, if you like, behind the Jesus activity. Jesus saw the crowds. He was a man on a mission. He was going around to village and town, connecting with their synagogues, their communities. He was seeing the hurt and the pain. But he didn't just see it, did he? He had compassion. He was moved. He didn't just say, oh, that's a shame. Let's move on to the next place. No, he felt it here. The original Greek word used for compassion is the idea of feeling it in our inner parts. Probably the language we use today is like a kick in the guts. You feel it here. You see something, you hear something, you see something, you're like, whoa. It really hits you hard. And that brokenness, that confusion, that chaos hit Jesus right here. And he starts to make comment on it. The crowds were not the problem because they were helpless and hopeless. Two words he used to describe them. They were confused and helpless. This word confused can also have the meaning of the sense of being bullied, the sense of being harassed, the sense of being oppressed. Jesus looked at these people in that region of Galilee and said, you know what? I think they're being bullied. I think they're being oppressed. I think they're being downtrodden. You might say, well, that's obvious. There was a Roman oppressive regime. Yes, politically this was happening. But maybe spiritually with some of the rules and regulations that were going on around their places of worship. But also maybe because of poverty and struggle and difficulties. There was this sense of these people downtrodden, bullied. Therefore, there was this feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. The sense of the word is they could not help themselves. Sometimes we have this expression, don't we? Oh, you need to pick yourself up by your bootlaces. I remember as one person commentated, that's fine if you've got boots and laces. But sometimes people don't have that. So they can't pick themselves up. They can't help themselves up. Life is hopeless and helpless because they do not have the resources to deal with the confusion, the harassment, the oppression, the sense of being downtrodden. This, Jesus says, look out for this. When you see this kind of aimlessness, then it's harvest time. What's the problem here? People are oppressed, confused, they feel helpless and hopeless. And Jesus sums it up there in that last statement. These people are helpless and hopeless and confused. Why? Because there is a lack of godly, spiritual, social leadership. It's described here as sheep without a shepherd. We're seeing all sorts of farm illustrations here. Sheep without a shepherd. This is the language of the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament. When there is a lack of leadership or poor leadership, you're saying, these people are just wandering around. Kerry and I, we managed to blag a freebie at Ickworth on Friday. Beautiful sunny day, and it's National Trust property. And we went along, and there were sheep everywhere. We were just walking along, and they were on the roads, they were on the pathways, and it was chaos, to be honest. You're like, oh, do we walk by them? What happens here? I don't know. I'm a town boy. I don't know what sheep could do to you, Could nibble my kneecaps. Who knows? But, we were like, they're all over the show. But in a way, it feels quite safe at Ickworth, doesn't it? It's all self-contained. But imagine in a desert setting where much of Israel is based, this would lead to death, disease, struggle, problems, loss of income, this lack of spiritual leadership. And that's why when Jesus steps in saying, hey, I'm here bringing in a new kingdom. I am a king who can offer proper leadership. It won't be corrupt. It won't fall short. It won't be using the power for my benefit. It'll be using it for your benefit. So that confusion, that harassment, that bullying you're experiencing, I can come alongside you to address that and deal with the chaos and the disorder. People need help. People need leadership. This is the message of Jesus at this point in time. And this is why I think it's harvest time now. If you were to look at the recent figures and statistics of our confidence in leadership, it's probably at an all-time low. Whether it's politicians, whether it's civil authorities, dare I say, whether it's church leaders, the amount of scandals that have been going on. So yeah, I'm not immune of this. I'm not saying we're better. There is a dearth of leadership. There is that sense of brokenness, and we haven't got the answers. As we look at Israel and Gaza, we look at Ukraine, we look at all these different places, and we're like, where's this leading? Conversation I had with yesterday. Nice, easy question. Dave, is World War III on the way? Just throw that out as an afternoon tea. I'm like, wow. Bright, intelligent people saying, what's the answer? We don't know. Cost of living crisis. Fuel payments being reduced. How are we going to get through winter? There is a sense in which people, I think, are living this verse out. Confused. Feel bullied and oppressed because they haven't got enough money or haven't got a voice, are not seen, not heard. There's a lack of leadership to help them. Leaders seem to be looking after themselves rather than looking after their people. This is harvest time when we see this level of aimlessness. So what's the response? Two responses from Jesus. First of all, he feels the angst. Jesus says to his disciples, the harvest is great. In other words, the time is now to make an impact. But as he looks around, his conclusion is the workers are few. He just said, I've walked around 250 towns and villages in Galilee. Every place I go, I'm seeing the same thing. But I'm stuck with one physical body. I can't do all this whilst I'm in a physical body. I can't make a difference everywhere because I've got limitations. Where are the other leaders? Where are the other people who are going to step up and help? I say this is harvest mentality, isn't it? All hands on deck. There is a short period of time to get the crops in. Let's grab and get anybody. That sense of community where people come together. If one farmer's got his field done, well, go and help someone else get their fields done. This mentality of coming together. And this is what Jesus is sharing with his followers. His followers, the 12 disciples, saw exactly what Jesus saw. They traveled with him throughout Galilee. And as I say, if you read Matthew 8 and 9, they saw the blindness of people. They saw the hurt and pain. They saw the leprosy, the diseases, the death of people. They saw people being excluded and limited in what they could do. They saw the oppression. And Jesus is like, you've traveled with me, boys. You've seen it. And you're just going to leave it up to me. That sense of being overwhelmed, that sense in which demand exceeds supply. Jesus said, do you feel it? Do you feel the frustration? Do you feel the pain? And as we've got engaged as a church in our community, God, this resonates. Doesn't matter what we do, there always seems more people. You know, the community grocery, it's great, but there's always more people struggling with more issues. Demand is overwhelming compared to what we can supply. So we feel this a little bit. As we as a church try and provide some leadership for our community on the way we should do things, on the way we should support people who are struggling, we feel the pain of this. And so what's the solution? The solution is, my clicker should work. There we go. This is what Jesus says. So pray to the Lord of the harvest who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into the field. It's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it, really? We're short of workers, so what's the answer? Let's ask people, let's ask somebody who can provide more workers. And again, when I'm watching Clarkson's farm, you know, if they're short of something, they go and ask somebody. At harvest time, we need another tractor. Well, give that farmer a call, tell him to get his tractor here. We need a combine harvester. Well, ask somebody. When we're short of something, we ask the person who's got the resources. And this is the picture and image here, saying, go to the Lord of the harvest, go to the creator of the world, go to the one who manages the physical harvest and the people harvest. If we're short of resources, let's ask the person who can fill the gap to fill the gap. Whether we do it as individuals, we could pray, or in our groups, or in more wider, bigger church groups. Can we get on the agenda of Jesus and saying, wow, Jesus, we're seeing the problems, we're feeling the pain, the confusion. We just need more bodies out there to make a difference, to be active. Please send them out. And so, yeah, it's kind of struck me this a little bit. Because week after week, we'll stand up here and say, oh, this area of ministry is short. Oh, the grocery needs some more helpers. Or the kids' work needs some more helpers. And we're constantly announcing it. And yet, how much have I prayed about it is the issue. Maybe the reason why we don't have the workers we think we should have is because we haven't prayed enough. If we don't ask God, if we don't connect with God, who is the one who moves and works in people, then how? How are we going to see this gap filled? Our failure to pray just means more pain and more failure. Our failure to ask means more disorder and confusion and chaos. We have to go to the God of hope, the God who steps in for the helpless people of this world in order to see this kind of provision. And let's jump on this next slide. Just that middle bit there. If you're like, what next? What can we do? What's the application of this? Pray aggressively for God to raise up and send out leader disciples. Please note that word aggressively. Now, why do I say that? Well, this word here for send more workers out is not a passive word. The idea of sending out, we kind of think, oh, Jesus, wouldn't it be lovely? God, perhaps if you could give someone a nudge. Perhaps if you could just drop a few hints with somebody, they might come and help. Or they might put a shift in to make a difference in their workplace or their neighborhood or their community. Perhaps you can just whisper in their ear. This is not the language of this verse. That idea of being sent out in the original Greek language is the idea of boot, giving someone a big kick up the backside and saying, get out there. The word is thrust, throw out. Sometimes it's used in terminology for throwing the rubbish out. This is the language that Jesus, he's saying, right, boys, I want you to pray, and this is the way I want you to pray. Heavenly Father, start kicking people at the backside to get out there. This is the language that's being used in the original language here. Do you feel the force of it? Jesus feels the angst so much and says, we can't mess around here. We've got a moment, we've got a window. There is chaos, there's disorder, there's struggle, there's pain. We need to step in now. We can't wait. It's too urgent. It's too serious. Just like at any physical harvest time. And so this is where I'm asking the question. What next for you as you listen to this, as you hear these familiar words for many of you? What are we going to do? Are we really going to pray? And one way we can pray is to join this Brighter Bury Renewal Prayer Initiative. We launched it in September, where we said, look, can you choose one day of a month? And whatever you pray for our town of Bury St Edmunds. Like we provide regular updates via WhatsApp, and it's been brilliant because there's usually 31 days in a month, and currently we've got 27 people praying. So we're 4 days short, basically. Okay, in February it's a piece of cake, we're covered, okay? But generally speaking, people signing up and saying, yeah, for one day a month, I'm going to pray for our town. I'm going to pray this stuff for our town. Because sometimes we look at our town and think, oh, Bury, it's lovely. It's nice. People don't lock their doors. Hey, scratch beneath the surface. There is chaos. There is pain. There is hurt. See it every day. Feel it every day. Hear it every day. And then, as we pray, this has got to be the foundation, the fundamental start. Can we do something? Can we get a bit active? Are you able physically to make a difference in some shape or form? We often advertise what we can do here through Bridge and church, but maybe it's in your neighborhood, it's with your family, it's with some people you just know and think, can we step in? It used to break my heart sometimes just listening to my boys when they're at the local schools here. They come home and chat about their mates. And you just hear the brokenness, the damage, relationship breakdown, sometimes abuse and stuff like that. And I used to get hold of my lads and say, look, you can bring your mates here anytime you like. You can bring them to our house anytime you like. Because we've got to provide something, a safe space, just do something, an alternative to what some of their friends were going through. Maybe that's what God might lay on your heart. Would you be the answer to your prayers? You're signing up, say, yeah, Dave, got it. I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask the Lord of the harvest to kick people out into the harvest. I'll do it. But are you willing to actually be an answer to that prayer? It's quite a famous story told about a missionary sharing in a church group. And the person who was interviewing them and just trying to get the information out and said, oh, anything we can pray for. And the missionary said, oh, well, we need some more finance. We need some support, a little bit like Andy and Becca were mentioning earlier on the video. And the person doing the interview said, stuff that. We ain't praying for that. He said, right, everybody, put your hands in your pockets and let's have an offering right now. And what was in the room was enough to support these people in their mission work. That is being an answer to our own prayers sometimes. God might want you to be the answer. So yeah, as we think about Bury, we've got this model. Can we put it into practice? I'm sensing the harvest is now. I'm sensing people are harassed, people are helpless. And God is here saying, I long to set people free. I long to provide purpose and direction. I long for us to be the remedy. Will we be those people to make a difference? This might feel all very overwhelming and too much. I get it. And so what I want to do now is show a video. We've just formed a partnership with an organization called I-61, and they're interviewing a guy from the Evangelical Alliance, a guy called Phil Knox, who's quite an enthusiastic little chap. And he's sharing what this might look like. He doesn't do all the big picture stuff. He's asking the question, is one of the things we can do just be good friends with people? Is this part of the solution? The way we provide leadership is, let's just get better at doing friendship. So there is a 27-minute interview, but we won't see that this morning because you'll probably want to get home to your Sunday dinner. But there is a 4-minute clip, and then maybe in your small groups you can watch the 27-minute one. It's great because there's questions you can do as a group. So